This is Doug Ayers, remote from, you in Nashville? You in Nashville, Doug?
Yes.
Yeah, remote from Nashville. It's a little later there, but thank you, Doug.
Hey, are y'all seeing the presentation or the notes right now?
Maybe I can.
Do I need to swap it?
No, it's perfect.
All right. I heard it's good, so are we ready?
Yeah, go ahead and start, Doug.
All right, awesome. Well, I was following on Twitter Zane's presentation, so it sounds like she did a great job, as she always does, and hopefully I can carry on that enthusiasm and excitement around SalesforceDX and developing applications. And I want to take the ideas that Zane was sharing with you earlier, and how can we do our continuous integration and delivery with a new kind of build pack for Heroku called the Salesforce Buildpack, and taking advantage of some cool features of Heroku in this mashup. My name is Doug Ayers. I'm a technical curriculum developer with Trailhead, and I work alongside Zane and the other evangelists. And my primary objective is to try and create curriculum, hands-on exercises, instructor-led content to help you, the customers and developers, to adopt Salesforce technology and be successful with it. And so on that note, Dreamforce is coming to town here in September, and my team has been working really hard on putting together these pre-conference boot camps. So definitely encourage you to sign up for those if you're coming to Dreamforce. And what you're kind of getting out of tonight in 2 hours from Zane and
sorry to interrupt, Doug. Do you have slides going, or?
Yeah. Do you not see the slides?
We don't see the slides. Is your screen shared?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't see an option to switch. Isn't that me though?
Yeah,
that's my.
PowerPoint.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay. Now, next question: which side of PowerPoint do you see, the notes or the full slide?
Yeah, we see presenter view, unfortunately, but we can make do.
Hey! Woohoo! We got there.
All right, so this is what I was talking about, the pre-conference boot camps. And so what you're getting from Zane and me tonight in roughly 2 hours, that's just a drop in the bucket. We've got 3 full days of teaching you how to get started with SalesforceDX, Heroku, continuous integration, Git for source control and packaging, and much, much more. So definitely encourage you to come out to the boot camp. All right, forward-looking statements. In this demo, I will be talking about some products that are in beta, specifically unlocked packages. And so, friendly reminder, make all your purchasing decisions on currently available features. Now, specifically on the forward-looking statements, in general, SalesforceDX is available and it's supported. Same with Heroku. It's generally available and supported. But what I'm going to be demoing tonight, a specific mashup using a Salesforce Buildpack and unlock packages, both of those are still in development. It's beta, so those aren't officially supported, but they're really cool, and we're going to try it out tonight. Now, the grand vision here with our continuous delivery is we want to make releasing our Salesforce application to our Salesforce environment as easy as a click of a button. Okay, that way it is repeatable, it's easy, and whenever it's time to come release day, it should be a non-issue. Now, just make sure we're on the same page. Yes, we're talking about how are we going to deploy our Salesforce apps, and we're going to be leveraging Heroku. Well, what is Heroku? It joined the Salesforce family a few years ago, and it is a platform as a service. So it makes it really easy for developers to deploy their code and not have to worry about infrastructure or networking or how to scale their apps. You just write code, deploy it, and go have fun. And they make it really easy to get your code up into Heroku just by using Git, right? So every time you go up to Heroku and you create your logical app, it gives you a Git repository URL, add that to a remote to your local project, Git push Heroku master, and your code's up and in a way. They also have tight integration with GitHub. So you could be your team pushing to your GitHub repository, and that can automatically sync over to Heroku as well. So very easy to get your code up into Heroku. But once it's there, we got to think about, well, how does it become a runnable app, and how does it become a Salesforce runnable app, right? So Heroku leverages this concept called build packs, and these build packs are just scripts, like bash scripts or shell scripts, and they essentially do anything and everything that you would want to have happen that makes sense for the programming language you've chosen, what you're wanting to do, databases you want to connect to. And they do things like compile your code, or maybe push static assets to a CDN, maybe run a database migration script, whatever your intelligence needs to be, and make that where it can run on a Linux server. And Heroku calls the Linux runtime servers that your app is deployed to dynos. They have lots of officially supported build packs for a lot of the programming languages that people use on Heroku, such as Node.js, Ruby, Java. And for any of those non-officially supported build packs, there are literally thousands that the community has built and put together. And that's kind of where the Salesforce Buildpack falls into this conversation tonight. Now, we are all Salesforce developers. We're really excited about writing our Apex code, our Lightning components, structuring all the cool things we can do on Salesforce. And you're thinking, Doug, how does Heroku fit into this? I deploy my Salesforce code to Heroku. It's not going to be a runnable app, right? And you're right. We're not going to use Heroku as the web host, but we will be leveraging this concept of Salesforce build packs, where we're going to hook into the build system and using some of the cool features that Heroku also offers under this umbrella of Heroku Flow. And we'll use that as our continuous integration and build server to deploy out to our actual Salesforce environments. And that's what I'm going to be demoing to you tonight. Now, Heroku Flow, it's an umbrella term like SalesforceDX, and it comprises a few concepts. One, leveraging the GitHub integration. So your teams are opening pull requests and committing to your branches, and Heroku is going to feed off that to kick off and drive the automation. Also, this thing called Heroku pipelines, which allows us to set up this kind of linear flow going from, say, your development sandboxes to your UAT environment, and then eventually down into production. And we're going to be able to automate that and make it as easy as a click of a button to move our code. So here's a screenshot of a pipeline set up, and we have our 4 different stages going left to right: review, development, staging, and production. And each of those white cards in the various columns, those represent a Heroku app, right? And each Heroku app, not only does it have its Git repository URL that you're kind of pushing code into it from, but they also have their own configuration variables or environment variables. And it's those that we use to make sure that each one of those Heroku app cards know which Salesforce environment they actually are tied or linked to. And the Salesforce Buildpack is going to read those environment variables to know, all right, you wanted to deploy code into the development sandbox versus your UAT sandbox. And as you can see on here, we've got the promote buttons, and that's where the Heroku pipelines really gives us that feeling of continuous delivery being very easy. We just click the button and the release process moves on. We could even automate the deployments using the Heroku CLI, getting into like continuous deployment processes. And then within each column or each stage, we have the option to add multiple Heroku apps, in each one, again, representing different Salesforce environments. And this makes it easy for us to deploy to one or more downstream environments simultaneously. So it's a very powerful tool here. Yeah. So coming back, how are we going to loop Salesforce into all this? And how we're going to tie into the pipelines is with build packs. And so the Salesforce build packs, these are open source. And I've been working with Wade Wagner, Senior VP of Platform at Salesforce, and Chris Wall, one of the architects at Salesforce, recently to try and really beef this up to leverage SalesforceDX, unlock packaging, and really drive this continuous delivery flow. All right, so this is the last slide before we jump into the demo, but I want to just give you a high level overview of what is the Buildpack doing in each one of these stages. So we're starting on the left on the review. This is triggered when on GitHub you open a pull request. Okay, the Buildpack has intelligence to know what stage you're in, and in the review, it's going to create a scratch org. It's going to push the code and metadata that that pull request represents into that scratch org. It's going to make it available for testing, so you and your team can log in, kind of functionally test it, see what the UI is like, and then come back to your pull request, and if you like it, go ahead and close and merge the pull request. When that pull request gets closed, the Buildpack will automatically delete that temporary scratch org. It's going to clean up the resources there. Now, when you merged into the master branch, that's going to kick off the development stage. And that's going to create a new unlocked package version of your code. And then it's going to install that package into the development environment, which might be, say, a developer sandbox. And at this point in the automation, you now know that you have a package that can be installed, and you validated that it could be packaged and it's installable and all that goodness. So then you're getting to the point where in the Heroku pipelines, I'm ready to release my app, right? I'm ready to push it downstream, maybe to QA and UAT environments. And now it is already primed and ready. You can just click that promote button or use the Heroku CLI to automate that promotion. And now this is different from, say, using chain sets, and I won't try and repeat everything that Zane was sharing you earlier, but the unlocked package is going to be immutable. So everything that you knew and tested with that package yesterday, it's going to be the same today. And so when you install and promote that package through your other downstream environments, UAT sandbox, and eventually into production, you have a strong guarantee what went out with it. There wasn't a chance for maybe the change set to have picked up some extra metadata or things to have changed in limbo as the code and metadata was moving from one org to the other. So a lot of strong governance there and audit trail. All right, so enough chit chat, Doug. Let's get to the live demo. So here we are in Visual Studio Code, and I have just a plain Jane little SalesforceDX project, and I've got two Apex classes in here. One's a demo controller. It's got one little method. It's going to return a string. That's fun. And then we have a test class, which is going to assert that the method is returning that same value. Okay, but as you can imagine, this SalesforceDX project could have anything and everything that's unique to the app that you're wanting to push. In addition to that, we also have a new file called app.json. Now, this file is specific to Heroku, and this is when you want your project, your app, to kind of hook into the build system. And a couple lines of code in here I want to share with you. The first one is telling Heroku, hey, when my app gets deployed to up into Heroku, these are the build packs that I want to evaluate my code and actually do something with, right? So that's how we're linking to the Salesforce side of things. We're also able to say, hey, these are the environment variables that the Heroku app needs to have configured. And if they aren't, then the build needs to kind of like auto fail. It's a non-starter kind of scenario. Later on in this script, just to kind of show you how you can even further hook in and customize the process, you could run other scripts that are a part of your actual project in your source code to override or enhance behaviors that are going on, say, during the test phase, or perhaps when that pull request got closed and it's deleting the scratch org. So there's ways for you to hook into the build system beyond what the Buildpack provides out of the box. At this point, with our SalesforceDX project, our metadata, and now our app.json, we are ready to push this up to Heroku and start leveraging with pipelines. Now, I could go into the Heroku UI and click through all the menus and try and wire up all the different Heroku apps and the configuration variables, but that's going to be very tedious, and I don't want to do that. And so Wade Wagner, in all his awesomeness, has put together a setup script that leverages the Heroku CLI that's going to go ahead and scaffold out the pipeline. Now, I'm going to go ahead and run this. And while it's running, we'll talk through what the script actually is doing. Up here at the top, we just need to specify a few variables. The first few here are just what do we want the name of our pipeline to be when we look at it in the Heroku dashboard, and what those Heroku app names are for the dev, staging, and prod environments. Then we go ahead and tell it, well, I've got dev, staging, and prod. What Salesforce environments do those need to pertain to? And so here we're going to give the aliases to our Dev Hub and the other Salesforce environments that we've already authorized with the Salesforce CLI on the machine wherever you're running this one-time setup script. And then, because we are deploying our code through an unlocked package, we tell the script, hey, this is the package name that we're using, so it knows how to find the actual package IDs to install. And because we have our Salesforce app, we're going to be having that in version control, right? We're going to use it for the GitHub integration. So we're going to also tell the pipeline, this is the GitHub repository where the code is at, so that it's picking up on when the pull requests are opening and when you're committing or merging into your master branch.
Doug, sorry to interrupt. Can you do zoom in? Can you do Ctrl plus, please?
You need me to zoom it in further?
Yes, please.
Is this better?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. The other few things that's going on in the script is it's going to build out a destroy script, so you can kind of undo what got built out, especially if you're wanting to play around and change the configurations. And then later on, it's just creating the app and setting up a bunch of the configuration variables. One thing I do want to point out here is this line. It uses the Salesforce CLI to obtain an SFDX auth URL from each of those Salesforce aliases that we referred to at the top of the script. You get this from the force org display command using the verbose parameter. And this URL, it's specific to the Salesforce CLI. It's a way for you to just pass that string, store it over in Heroku, store it on another machine, hand it off to a team member, and then they are able to use the CLI to add that as an authorized org to their instance of the CLI. Much simpler and easier than going the JWT auth route, which also requires a certificate and encryption keys. So I really enjoyed using the SFDX auth path. And so that's how we're going to tell Heroku about our Salesforce environments without having to actually give them our username and password. All right, so let's jump over here to Heroku. I should have my new pipeline in here. And now I've got my stages, and each one of those cards representing the different environments. And so if I were to jump in to say, hey, the dev app, which was going to represent one of my sandbox environments, and I look at the config variables, you'll see there I have the auth URL that it will use with the CLI. All right, so coming back to our pipeline, we're also linked with our GitHub. The review apps are automatically going to kick off whenever we open a pull request, but I also want to add an extra piece of automation. The development stage, I want this to kick off whenever we merge the master branch. So I'm going to configure some automatic deploys here. Choose the branch of my choice. Yeah, awesome. All right, so we got our pipeline scaffold. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip over to GitHub. I'm going to open a pull request, and we're going to see how we're going to promote this app through the different environments. Okay? We're here to GitHub. I'm going to navigate down into that Apex class, the controller. I'm going to make a simple change here just so that we have something to open a pull request for. I want to move this literal string out from the method. I'm just going to create a new variable here. Static final string. Call this app version. We'll just return that in the method instead. Down here at the bottom, I'm actually going to create a new branch and open that pull request. Heroku, because I have the GitHub integration tied with it, it's going to get notified the pull request was opened. And over here on the left, we should see it kick off here. Yep. So now it's creating. I'm going to drill in here and let's look at the logs. Now this is a live demo, and I've done this half a dozen times between yesterday and today, and every time it behaves a little differently in how long some of the network calls or API calls take. So hopefully this doesn't take too terribly long, but if we do run into any snags, I do have, like any good cooking show, the completed pipeline with having promoted a package through, if we need to jump over to that one. All right, so what we're seeing here, this is the log output from the Salesforce Buildpack. And so the pull request kicked off, right? We opened that, Heroku figured it out, review stage is starting. It used that SFDX auth URL from the Heroku config to auth into my dev hub. And so then it created a scratch org, and then it came down and it's going to push, here, going to push the metadata into that environment. First it created the org, and now it's going through the release process. And it's going to push all the metadata up into that scratch org, and then we'll be able to log in to that scratch org, functionally test, do whatever you wanted to do to kind of validate the changes before choosing to close that pull request. Are you all still able to see this, or do I need to still zoom in?
Yeah.
All right. So here we did the push into the scratch org, a couple of classes. Now, normally, if you were doing Heroku app development and you had a Java web app or Node.js or something, you could click on this Open App button or navigate to your Heroku app's URL, and you'd probably have an app running. But again, we're deploying Salesforce code, and my Apex classes don't constitute a web app, and so we get this error as expected. Now we're in talks with the Heroku product managers to try and see, hey, is there a cool way that we might be able to support scenarios where we want to leverage the build system, but our app isn't hosted, and maybe have a hook into maybe the Open App button or something. But for now, again, this is still in development. What I can do is I'm going to grab the SFDX auth URL from the log file to that scratch org that got created, and I'm going to authenticate into that locally. We'll play with that. I need to put this into a file, so I'm just going to echo this into a file called url.txt. Sounds like a good place to put it. And then we're going to store that url.txt. All right, so I'm going to create a new alias in my Salesforce CLI based on whatever org that URL represented. And so that's a way for you to share credentials back and forth without actually having to literally know the username and password I'm passing around. All right. Now we can open that org up. What I want to do here is when we get into the scratch org, just show you that the changed code from the pull request is what's in here. Well, there's the demo controller. And indeed, there it is. I guess that's around 8:15 your all's time. There's the pull request change code. Ta-da! All right. Now, we come back. We said, oh, this is great, the greatest code ever. Let's go ahead and merge this into our master branch. And this is going to kick off this next piece of automation. We'll come back to our pipeline. And what we should see is that the development stage, there we go, picked up on that commit to the master branch. And now it's going to build. Let's jump into that log. Now, the review stage for the pull request, it's creating and deleting scratch orgs, right, for each and every pull request. But once we moved into the development stage, we're wanting to say, hey, whatever code you put onto the master branch, we're going to assume that means you want that to be deployable. And so here, it's going to create a new package version. It's not creating a scratch org, and it's going to install it into the Salesforce environment that represents development for us. probably a developer sandbox. For demo purposes, I am just, all my orgs are scratch orgs. Now this may take a minute, so I'm going to jump over and talk about a couple slides while we wait for that to install. All right, can y'all see my slides?
Yep.
Awesome. So using the Salesforce CLI, it is fabulous, and you can learn about all the different commands and capabilities on the developer docs. Or if you're working on the command line, you can always add the help parameter, --help, and you'll get to see a list of what parameters and usage. That's cool. But my personal favorite is using command line autocomplete. And again, here Wade comes to our rescue, and he has built out Salesforce CLI auto-completions for both the bash and the ZSH shell. So I definitely encourage you to check those out if you're working in bash or the ZSH shell. Now, I'm sure Zane has talked a whole lot about the differences of change sets and packages and how you deploy things. And what I want to talk about is the upgrade and downgrade ability of a package and some of the differences between going through change sets or using an IDE or ANT with a package.xml, and then with the way we're doing it tonight, unlock packages. Now, all three, they can create metadata. Whatever is new in the change set, in your package, that compared to where you're installing, that's always going to create new metadata. Okay, so same there. And then if you're including metadata that you're changing the code, you're changing what the buttons do, yeah, you're able to overwrite and update orgs. We're all very familiar with those two capabilities. Where unlock packages, I think, really shines is this third part, where it's actually able to automatically identify and delete metadata out of the target org. This is something that change sets in the setup UI absolutely don't do. They don't support. They only do creating or updating. You can delete metadata through the package.xml if you're going through the ANT or an IDE, but you have to craft another file called destructivechanges.xml. And so you have to handcraft that to figure out what you actually want to have deleted through the metadata API. Well, with unlocked packages, all I need to do is remove the metadata, say I don't want these Apex classes or Lightning components or page layouts from the package, create a new version, so version 3. I install version 3 into the org where I had already installed those other components. Salesforce will automatically delete them for me. So I'm automatically going to remove them. Now, if what you had removed was schema, say your objects or fields, those don't get immediately deleted. We don't want to introduce data loss, but it does flag them as deprecated. So it at least allows you and your admins in your org to know, hey, these fields and objects aren't going to be used anymore according to this package. You'll probably just need to go ahead and take a backup of the data and think about where you're going to go next with it. Okay. Let's check on the package creation process. Build finished. Okay. We scroll up on our logs. What do we see it do? I'll just jump over to the next log. We know that it created the package. Now we're releasing. And all right, this is the part where not sure how long this is going to take. Waiting for the package version to be published. So it can take anywhere from a few seconds to a few minutes once a brand new package version has been created for that to kind of become available for installation. If there's any ISVs in the room, they're very familiar with this. When they create their new managed package versions, they got to wait a little bit before they can install it. I'm going to give this maybe a couple more seconds here. I want to be sensitive to your all's time. Oh, right on schedule. Thank goodness. All right, so now it's going to install the package. This does run really quick. And then we'll be able to jump into our dev org to see what got installed. All right, awesome. So I'm going to flip back over to Visual Studio Code because I have that dev org already off locally. I'm going to run into that. Force org open. and I want that to be my dev org. All right. And what we should see here, we will have the Apex code, right, that got deployed, but it's going to be linked with the package that we just installed. So I'm going to come look at installed packages. Or my internet may be going out. Can y'all still hear me? Am I still?
Yeah, that's just the setup menu. Don't worry about it.
All right, it's just the setup. All right, there we go. So here we've got our package got installed, right? And we drill into the package, and we can look at the components. And here we can see there's our code. Awesome. And if we drill down into the controller or any of those components, yep, that's what we had on GitHub. So that's got our change in it. But compared to just looking at Apex classes or metadata in your org without packaging, with unlocked packages, it's very clear. There's this whole message to let you know, hey, it's part of a package. Which package is it a part of? It's part of demo package 1. And so it's very clear how the components have been put together and what apps they belong to, rather than just going into an org and it's just a sea of metadata. And unless you've got really good naming conventions and documentation or tribal knowledge, it may not all make sense of how everything's interconnected. This makes it very clear. I really love that part. Let's come back to our pipeline. So what have we done so far? We opened a pull request. That spun up a scratch org. We validated that. We loved it. We closed the pull request, which merged into the master branch, which kicked off the development stage, which then created a new package version and installed that into this environment. We were able to log into that environment, see it, we loved it, and now we're ready to promote to the downstream environments. So now we want to go into staging. This might be a full copy sandbox, UAT, whatever. And all I have to do now is click promote to staging. It's a one click of a button, and now I'm releasing to the next environment, or we could have automated that with the Heroku CLI. Now here you can see in the last couple stages, we started off with a building message, but because the staging stage, it's not recreating anything. It's not creating a new package version. It's going to install the exact same package version that was over here in development. So what we should see in this log, yep, is it came in, it authenticated into the org, and now it's going to install that package. And the package is already available, so we're not having to go through that lengthy wait. So this should take complete here in a couple seconds. All right, cool. So now I will jump into my test org, and we should see the exact same package version there. I get to packages. Yep. So that just installed. Same package version. Look at our components. Same package components. And same package code. Right? We are on a roll. Oh, and so now we come back. Well, that was after it installed the package. Way up here, it installed the package, right? Printed out to show us what the package, what version got installed, and all that fun stuff. And then the build pack went through and ran our tests and collected the code coverage, and then printed out to the log file for our convenience all the test coverage, so we see what files got covered, what percentage, the tests that were ran, whether or not they passed, and all sorts of that fun statistics here. So we know that the package got installed and all the tests have been run, and we're doing good. Back to our pipeline, and here we go. And what you're seeing, we also have the git commit to know what set of code has been deployed or is available at each app. So even though we're the mechanism, the vehicle to get that code moved over into Salesforce is going through that package, we know because of the GitHub integration what commit that came from. So if I come over back to GitHub and go to /commit/that git hash, it will take me to the specific commit here, and I could review all of the files, browse the files of the repository at that point in time. And so you can come back and say, hey, what was in version 5? What was in version 4? And you're looking at the Heroku dashboard and you're like, well, I don't know what's out there. I know that when I was a customer many years ago and we would deploy things, sometimes we weren't sure what got out there, especially if someone went around the system and made tweaks of code directly in the org. But here we know this git commit goes with what package version. We installed the package version. A lot of auditing and governance there. And so the last piece here, we're ready to make it go into production. Click promote to prod, and there we go. Now in this simple demo, I only ever had one Heroku app per stage, right? But in the slides, I had an example of having 2. So we could add multiple apps at each stage if you had, say, QA and a UAT, or maybe you had the an org for the Americas and one for Europe, or whatever, maybe you have different business units that have their own orgs, and you're just still trying to push the same package, maybe the same common code out to both. You would have that capability whenever you did the promotion. It could have gone to one or more orgs in the other, in the next stage. Now, one thing about production, I got a couple more slides here to show while we're waiting for that to finish. Here. But when package versions first get created, they start in a beta status. And beta packages cannot be installed into production orgs. And this is it's by design. It's not necessarily a security precaution, but it's a way to help prevent you from shooting yourself in the foot, perhaps. Because unlocked packages, as we discussed earlier, when you install them, it's going to shape the org to match what that package looks like. So if you've removed metadata out of that package, it's going to try and delete it from production. So there's this kind of a gate here to make sure, are you absolutely sure you want to install this particular package in your production org? Okay. And how you have to do a separate CLI command to promote the package version from beta to released. Now the build pack understands this. So when you promote into the production stage, that far right stage, the build pack is automatically going to mark that package as released and then install it into your production org. So it handles that all for you. So that check is handled at the Heroku dashboard level when you choose to promote into the production stage. And so your development lifecycle may look a lot like this. Your individual developers, they're developing in their own scratch orgs and then committing and merging all their code into version control, in this example, GitHub. And then your continuous integration and build process here that we're using with Heroku Flow is going to be creating those package versions, version 2, version 3, etc. And then at some point, you're going to be ready to promote that into production, and that version gets marked as released and installed and out to your users. Let's come back and see, check on the status of the last few bits. And here it got deployed. We got the same git commit hash on each one of those. We jump into its log file. We will see essentially the same output that we saw with the staging environment, except with this extra command here. Before installing, it went through and promoted that version so that it became released. then went through the process of installing, and then additionally ran the test, and we get all of our code coverage and all that fun stuff here in the log as well. And so lastly, I can come over, log into my prod org. As you can imagine, you know what you're going to find. You're going to find the same package version, the same back code, and all that greatness. But I've not had to use anything on my local machine to get the code promoted, right? All I was doing is perhaps working with my own local Scratch org, pushing and pulling metadata there, committing into GitHub repository, but the rest of the deployment and release process, the entire release process, was managed entirely through the Heroku flow, right? Same controller, should still have the app version up there. Woohoo! Awesome. And so there we go. We have used GitHub, host our code, pull request, merged in the master, created our package version, and then we use the dashboard here to promote the code into downstream environments. And there you go. There you have it. I'll close with 2 last slides, and then if we have any time for questions or anything else. So that was a real quick run through of using SalesforceDX and unlock packages. Of course, where do you go to continue learning? Trailhead. We've got lots of great modules and projects out there. I encourage you to check those out. Final shameless plug for the pre-conference boot camps at Dreamforce, and we also run these at Trailhead DX. So hopefully y'all can come to both of those conferences. And thanks for attending. That's it from me.
Thanks, Doug. If anyone has any questions, you might have to speak up here. It's the laptop mic.
I got a question. Hey, Doug, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Sweet. So what would you, or how would you approach it if you're using something like a Git flow build process? So you wanted to, instead of merging directly to master from a Scratch org, you want to merge into, say, a QA or a staging branch and have that deployed to your staging org. And then when you're ready to move to production, that's when you move to master.
That is a good question. So on this Heroku app, I had chosen, and I only have the, well, here we might see multiple branches. Yeah. So every time I would create my pull request, I have these different branches. So you could have perhaps said, I want, when I merge into branch A, that's going to kick off this development process, create a package version, and install it. Each one of these could be configured to connect to different branches. Now, I think that would partially get what you were wanting.
Yep.
So this flow goes from one branch, this goes from a different branch. But the build pack is physically going to create a different package version.
Yep. And
in the current incarnation of the build pack, the stage is very important. So even though I had this set up to auto deploy from here, it's going to look for the stage being staging and say, oh, I don't need to build or create a new package version. I always just install. So that may get back to, we might need to tweak the build pack for your specific use case, but build pack support that individual customization. But that would be one way. You could set up the Heroku apps to automatically kick off from different branches and do whatever you wanted to do based on how you customize the build pack at that point. Does that answer your question?
it does. That is such a cool feature for Heroku pipelines.
Oh yeah, I love it. It's fabulous.
Hey Doug, I have a question as well. Can you hear me okay too?
Yes.
Cool. So you kind of mentioned auditing and governance a few times. Is the auditing part of Heroku, part of Salesforce, or what does that look like as part of this kind of build pack or release cycle that you're doing?
Right. So, big question on the whole governance and the audit trail, and let me clarify what I meant there. From one part of the audit trail is it's letting you know where, the traceability back, what code has been deployed into these environments, assuming that everything was going out the door through the pipeline.
So if I had this again, would it have a second record? Sorry.
Go ahead.
If I had done this again for a different deployment, say have my next best code change ever, would I see both entries there as like, hey, did you put it 1023 and then 1028, or the next day, that kind of thing? So it'll track it for each section. Well, you have multiple deployed today at lines when you deploy different changes. I guess it's the question.
Will you see multiple lines? Here at this screen, no, but if you drilled in and looked at the activity, you will have everything that's ever happened. If the config variables changed, and I've only pushed here once, but every time this builds, you'll have another line here with what commit was it, the date and time, the version as far as like Heroku is concerned, auto incrementing, and each time has its own log, so you can see what's going on there. Now, when I was saying governance, maybe you have a change board that needs to sign off on what's getting promoted, right? And maybe they don't want you to physically click the promote button, or maybe you do. But if you wanted to fully automate the process, you might say have an approval process in Salesforce or something, and that caused something to kick off. As long as you could get to a point where you can invoke the Heroku API or invoke the Heroku CLI, you can connect to your pipeline and say, I'm ready to promote this app to the next environment. And so you could put some gates in front of it beyond, the admin or whoever is operating at the dashboard from a manual level, but you could put those gates using the Heroku API to automate what gets pushed over. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Awesome.
Answering all the questions.
Hey Doug, when you deployed to production, it looked like it was still a beta version. Could you show that screen again?
Yeah, so that's due to the lag from promoting updates to packages. So here, it's been a few minutes and I navigated back. The beta has disappeared from the version number of the package. So when you update details about a package, although that kind of, it happened and the CLI came back and said, hey, we're great, we can install the package, but it still took some time, and I don't know why it does. I can investigate internally. But it does take a few minutes to propagate for this to have shown that, hey, the beta status disappeared. But it eventually does disappear like we see now. But good eyes, eagle eye. Good up.
It's Chuck.
Chuck Liddell.
Oh, Chuck! Awesome, dude. Chuck's been teaching the Dev 601 Lightning Components course this week. Yeah.
Doug.
Yeah.
So I noticed in the script, the SFDX command still had that wait listed there. Do we really have to use that wait?
Yes.
Oh.
So in one of these logs, when we're installing the package, there you go. I think you're talking about these weights right here. Wait,
Yeah.
1,000, published weight 1,000. Yes. The published weight, this is just how it's designed, says how many minutes do you want to wait for that new package version to become available to be installed, which we saw, I think, back on the dev stage, if I jumped over there. It was waiting for several minutes. And then this parameter is telling the CLI, hey, wait this many minutes once I've started to install before bailing out. And so if these timeouts are exceeded, then this synchronous command will error out. And so you can kind of drive your flow, flow from within your script.
If you don't use them, is there a default that's like too low that you don't like?
You know, I don't recall what the default is. It might be like 1 minute or something like that, or 2 minutes.
How do you handle if you, let's say you set up your separate packages and you want to move some metadata between package 1 to package 2? Does that delete from production as part of the delete functionality, or is there a way to kind of move things between packages without negatively impacting your live environments?
Yeah, so what I heard is you were asking, I started out with, like in this scenario, a package that had some metadata. Then I decided I want to have package B, and I wanted to move metadata from package A to now belong in package B. And what's going to happen when you install package A and B back into the target org? Because you move the metadata, is that all of a sudden going to delete it out of that target org? That is a very valid question. I personally have not tried that scenario. It should be very easy to go try and test, but I think what I'll do is try and follow up with that by posting onto the meetup message, or somehow get that out to Daniel so he can share it with you all. But I'm not sure what happens in that case after you moved it.
Cool, thanks.
We have about 15 minutes. Do you guys want to save the time to hang out amongst yourselves?
Okay, let's say thank you to.
All right.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. I'll see you in class tomorrow, Chuck.
Right early. Be there.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Dan. Cynthia. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.